Big 10 Plus 4 is a member of Odd Pods Media and ASAP All Sports All Plays Network. Hello and good morning to Big 10 Plus 4. We bring you college sports with Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. The man on the other side of the screen is Tony Hollinsworth. Tony, how are we today?
I'm doing good. I'm going to be honest with you, man. I found something last night that really surprised me, and you probably saw it, and I have to say it to kind of stir the pot a little bit.
Oh, good Lord. Oh, are you going to go to Kevin Willard?
Yes, that was the exact thing. I knew you would know what it is.
I saw it when it came out, and I thought, this is going on the whiteboard.
Yep.
I feel bad for IU, honestly. Because you know what? And for those of you that don't know, Tony, go ahead and go where you were going to go. I apologize for cutting you off, but go ahead and say it, and we'll chat about it just a minute.
Are you saying I figured you would know? And for anybody that's wondering if maybe this is like a meme that somebody has made or like a troll account, nope, this was from college. This was from Fox on College Hoops, at least. According to Kevin Willard, the head coach of Maryland, Trace Jackson Davis is the best player in the country right now. I think he's more dominant than Zach Edey.
I had so much respect and for Kevin Willard.
Is it
because he's a good coach. He did very well at Seton Hall. I figured when he got hired by Maryland, Dalton was shocked that I praised it so much because it was kind of out of the blue. Yeah. But I praised it because I for whatever reason, I kind of have an affinity for Seton Hall, and it dates back to when in an '89 national championship game when I'd never heard of Seton Hall before, and they made it to the championship game and should have beaten Michigan. But they didn't. But that from that point on, I kind of, for some reason, I really like PJ Carlesimo, you know, so I paid attention to Seton Hall. So I've been to a couple of Butler games with my uncle who had season tickets. I chose the Seton Hall games for that to go. So I mean, like, I knew Kevin Willard. Then he makes this comment, and I'm like, well, I hope it's just a very wrong choice of words, because that man couldn't be more wrong. I'm sorry. Trace Jackson Davis has been doing wonderfully lately for 6 games.
Yeah.
Zach Edey the other night against Penn State got his 18th double-double, and he only we'll talk about that game against Penn State, but like, that's domination. He went against Gonzaga when they were number 6 in the country and dominated Drew Timme. He went against Duke the next night, the number 8 team, and he dominated Duke. Now, since then, both of those teams have kind of fallen off a little bit and are not quite that highly ranked. But the fact remains is he has dominated pretty much anybody he's gone against. So to tell me that Trace Jack, now, if he would have said at this time, and even now, then I would argue at this time, he's the most dominant player in the country, even over Zach Edey. I'd still argue, because Zach Edey's fresh off of 38-15 against Michigan State.
Right.
You know, that was his 5th game over 30 points this year, and all 5 of them were double-doubles.
Yeah.
So there is no debate here. And I honestly, you might find people that like other players, but there is nobody that I've seen speak that I respect out of their opinion that says anybody but Zach Edey. So I think he was fresh off we just played him, and he's the freshest one in their mind. That's the only thing I can get from that silly statement that Kevin Willard made.
Well, it's kind of crazy too to me, because, you know, not only did they just come off of a fresh play against him, you know, Maryland just beat them. So that's what also kind of makes
Yeah.
me surprised. It's like, how often do you ever hear a coach say, "Hey, this is one of the best players in the nation right now
That is
that we just
probably a
beat."
true statement, though,
Right.
Tony. Uh-oh, you went. Yeah, I can't hear you.
There we go.
So,
Sorry.
okay, that's all right.
One of the best players right now. But, how often do you ever hear that when the opposing team just beat you?
Right.
Because I don't hear that very often. Like, obviously in their coach, the coaches will typically say, "Hey, the team played a great game. Like they've got some great players right there." But I do give you credit to say that about a guy that you just beat. That kind of blows my mind a little bit. Like, wait a minute, you think he's the best player in the country, and you just beat him? So wait a minute. Like, wait a minute.
So I'm looking. He had 18 points in the loss against Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
He had 20 rebounds. That is an amazing output.
Yeah, it is.
But I can honestly look and probably all through this and say at no point did he out rebound an entire team.
Right.
Zach Edey has done that.
Mm-hmm.
That's dominant. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm not going to say, well, or I'm not going to accept an argument of, well, he's 7'4". He doesn't have to go very far. You still have to be athletic enough to get yourself into position and get those and be strong enough to get those rebounds and get those points in the paint. This is not Purdue's first 7-footer in the past 4 years.
Right.
Isaac Haas was 7'2". He didn't dominate like Zach Edey has.
Yeah.
He was damn good, but he did not dominate in the way that Zach Edey has this year. Period.
And I think people have to recognize too that, you look at, like I said, Michigan, I felt like gave a pretty decent blueprint because they frustrated Zach. Like Zach still ended up having a pretty decent game, but they frustrated because I watched him. I'm like, he usually makes that shot. He usually makes that too. And they were just attacking him.
You know what the kicker is you say that Michigan State frustrated him and he has his 2 career highs against them this year.
No, not Michigan State, Michigan.
Oh, against Michigan. Yes.
Michigan.
You're correct. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Michigan State, I'm like, I mean, don't get me wrong. The first matchup, maybe. I don't know I can't remember what they did to that team. As a team,
he had 32.
Yeah,
against
I think
Michigan State in
the first time,
Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yeah. So I think the first time they probably frustrated Purdue as a team, but I don't think they frustrated Zach Edey.
And I think the environment got
Yes.
Purdue. It always does. Breslin gets everybody. So if you go in with a win, you're happy you went into Michigan State and got a W. It doesn't matter if you won by 1 or 50. You got a win in Breslin.
Oh yeah. And you can say that for any game. A win is a win. It doesn't matter how bad, doesn't matter how pretty, how ugly. A win is a win. That's all that matters.
Yeah, Purdue lost by 1 point. It's still a loss. They could have lost by 25 and it would still go on as one loss.
One loss. Yeah.
I will give him a pass on the aspect of I will give him a chance to remedy that when when he goes against Zach Edey. And this is not at all taking anything away from Trace Jackson Davis. He has been playing out of his mind compared to what he was like at the beginning of the year. Not that it was horrible. I mean, he has a 20 he had 24 rebounds against Northwestern at the beginning of the calendar year. But up until that point, he had a big game against Miami of Ohio with 24 and 16. But other than that, he kind of he's scoring points. He's absolutely scoring points, but none of it was. He wasn't standing out as one of the best players in the conference, let alone the country. Yeah. And now he's starting to play even more out of his mind, which is where we expected him to be.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take anything away from him because he's playing very well. And tomorrow is going to be tough for Purdue.
Yeah.
Because for one thing, it's in Bloomington. And IU isn't that horrible.
No.
Yeah, they got beat by Maryland. Yeah, prior to their 5-game winning streak, they were worse than a dumpster fire. But they're ranked.
But they're the only other ranked team in the Big Ten.
They're playing good basketball right now.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a tough game for Purdue. Does Purdue lose? They could. I see many scenarios that Purdue loses. I also see Purdue going in and winning.
Yeah.
I mean, Purdue is the best team in the country. We're not, let's not mince words. They're the best team in the country. I don't care about what net rankings and stuff like that. They have proved it day in and day out that they are the best team in the Big Ten, and they beat everybody else that is of any consequence outside of their conference up to this point. And that's Gonzaga, Duke, Marquette. Like, they've played some decent teams to say, yeah, and they've done it convincingly.
Yeah.
So Trace Jackson Davis is one of the best players in the country. I'm not going to argue that. And he is, in my mind, the second best player in the Big Ten this year. Honestly, short of Zach Edey breaking his leg and not playing the rest of the season, that's the only way he doesn't get player of the year, to me, nationally and in the Big Ten.
Yeah. And I'll say this too, even if Purdue loses to IU on tomorrow, I don't think it doesn't hurt them, and it doesn't hurt them at all in conference play. Because like you said,
they're 3.5 games up right now.
Yeah, you could even see them potentially going. What was it, 11-2 on the second half of the season? Was it 11-2 on the second half?
It was 9-1 and 9-1 is what I proposed, because they went the first half at 9-1. If they went 9-1, I posit that they could go 8-2, 7-3, and I'd still think they're probably one of the best teams in the past 3 decades that we've seen in the Big Ten.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So I mean, I don't think it hurts them at all if they lose. And again, if you're going to lose to anybody, at least IU is ranked right now as the number 21 team in the country.
Yeah, but you never want to lose to IU.
Well, at least as a Purdue fan, you never want to lose to IU anyway.
I prefer to see IU never win. Well, it doesn't matter if it's against Purdue or not; just never win. No, but looking at the standings, let's look at the standings really quick. Illinois has fought themselves back into second place over Rutgers. Rutgers has gotten back into a tie with Illinois, 3.5 games back of Purdue at 7-4. Iowa's 6-5. But let's real quick, Tony. Let's think about what Dalton said a month ago, right around the turn of the calendar. Right, he said he thinks the Big Ten champion would have 14, maybe 13 wins. Looking at Iowa, that's what they're on track to do, and they're in 4th place at 6-5.
Yeah, tied at 4th place. Because again, that's kind of the crazy part about the Big Ten.
Jam.
There's a huge logjam because you've got Iowa, Northwestern, Michigan State, Maryland, IU, and Michigan.
So we had 12 teams last week on Wednesday that were within 3 games of each other. Now we have 10 teams within 2 games of one another.
Yes.
The other 2 dropped out a little further. Ohio State still losing. I don't know what is going there. Honestly, if they go below 5 or go the rest of the way under 500, they don't make the NIT right now. They're at 11-11 right now. I think they're hard pressed to make the tournament unless they do something in the Big Ten tournament.
Right.
But what happened? I mean, I know we talked about this on Wednesday, and I don't want to rehash the exact same things, but like, they've played since we've talked. They still haven't won.
Yeah, well, I mean, they played last night, and we thought, okay, they're playing Wisconsin. Okay, they'll
It's a
probably get
game,
and it was in Columbus. So I mean, It's like, okay, they've got home court advantage. Like they'll be able to kind of make this work. And I didn't get a chance to look at the actual box scores, but I'll look real quick. So
Wisconsin's not. Excuse me, Wisconsin isn't bad. They're 5. No. They were 4-6 entering that game last night, so they're right in the mix of things of that big log jam to where a couple games go their way. They're in great shape. Ohio State at 3-7 going into yesterday. They needed some more help, but it was still doable for them.
Yeah,
and now they're playing with. Well, maybe we don't want to go postseason playing.
Yeah,
which would be a travesty to not have Bryce Sensabaugh in the postseason.
Right. Well, and it gives you kind of an idea of how honestly bad Ohio State was on offense. Bryce Sensabaugh and Zed Key are the only two that had double-digit points.
Yeah.
Zed Key had 12, Bryce had 13. Like, that just gives you an idea.
And that's Sensabaugh being below his 4 points below his average.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and
like,
you look,
that means the defense for Wisconsin was doing what is expected. You never expect to completely shut down a star.
No.
You try to keep him below his average, or you let him get his average and you shut down everybody else. Well, it looks like to me that maybe they didn't need to do as much on shutting down everybody else and just kept Sensabaugh below his average.
Yeah. And I'll say too, it was not a pretty game because Wisconsin went 6 of 20, so they were 30% on 3-pointers, and then Ohio State went 4 of 14, so they were 28.6, so 29%. So they're right neck and neck. Field goals, Wisconsin 41.8, Ohio State 42.9. So this was not a pretty game.
Yeah.
And with Wisconsin, almost everybody that was at least their starters, except for Wall, he only scored 5 points. Tyler Wall scored 5. And then, of course, they had one person on the bench. Carter Gilmore scored 2. Everybody else of their starters, double digits or double digits. So it was not a pretty game, I would say, by either team. But I am still surprised that I know Ohio State's working with what they've got, and obviously Bryce is a phenomenal talent, and I think is what has even kept Ohio State relevant in basketball, especially in the Big Ten right now. But it does kind of surprise me how quickly and how far they've fallen off.
Mm-hmm. Connor, I should know this because I know his high school coach relatively well, but I think it's Isigian. I don't know. He's from Albion, Indiana, but he led the way for the Badgers last night with 17 over Ohio State. So they've got some, and he's a freshman, so like they've got some scorers. They've got the capability to score. So like Wisconsin, I never doubt that Wisconsin is going to compete with you. I never doubt that, but they're not Wisconsin from last year either.
No.
They're not coming in and taking the Big Ten by surprise.
Right.
But 5-point win. If Sensabaugh scores his average, they lose by 1. But with that, if you're able to score your average, somebody's going to get a point, maybe. I don't know. I mean, honestly, he's 4 points below. They lost by 5. They still lose if he hits his average. But if he stays around his average and maybe goes a little bit over, they win this game. Like it's that. So that won the game for Wisconsin. The other one that from last night before we were running a little heavy in the first quarter, shocker. Michigan went into Evanston and beat the Wildcats 68-51. Hunter Dickinson with 19. Boo Buie on the losing side with 23. Northwestern looks like they're coming back to not to what Northwestern has been historically, but they're getting a little bit more what we expected from them maybe this year. They've lost I believe it's 2 in a row, but it might be 3.
Yes, it's 2 in a row.
Yeah, 2 in a row. They're still 6-5 in the conference. I mean, but that's kind of what we were expecting to be. 2 weeks ago they were in second or third. Like they were in the mix. I don't think anybody expected them to continue and take the Big Ten, but they're starting to come back. I think they've lost maybe 4 of 6, 4 or 5. So they've dropped back enough to where they're kind of they're in that big cluster of teams separated by only 2 games.
Well, and it is I'm a little bit surprised because now with that loss to Michigan, when you look at the overall standings for Northwestern, aside from Minnesota, Northwestern is the only team that has more than 3 losses at home in the Big Ten right now.
They're 10-4 at home.
Yeah. Now, but again, it's crazy. Aside, right behind Purdue, they have the best away record.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well,
so
and you know what? That's where you kind of gotta take your consideration, I guess. Yeah, they have other than the worst team in the conference, they have the worst home record in the
Big Ten.
in the number of losses.
Oh yeah.
But they're 10-4 at
Yeah.
home. It's not like they're 5-4 or 3-4 or 5-7 like Minnesota or 7-3 like Nebraska. 7-3 is not bad.
Oh no,
at home.
You say because you're still winning over half your game. You're doubling.
But you're not. You're still 3 games below what Northwestern's done at home. Now, is that just happened that they're going to have plenty more away games? Probably. But still, the fact remains is they've got 10 wins at home. So while they've lost at home, they've won. They have they're middle of the pack on wins for home.
Yeah.
So Northwestern's going to be interesting. I want to look at the Purdue schedule because I know they've got Northwestern coming up before too long. Yeah, the 12th. What is today? The 4th. So next Sunday or next Saturday. Next Sunday. Next Sunday, the 12th, they play in Evanston. Might try to make the trip over there for that. I don't know. Actually, that's Super Bowl Sunday. I highly doubt I'm traveling to Chicago for it. But the point being is they only play Northwestern once. It's a good thing. They only play Wisconsin once. That's a good thing, but it's at Wisconsin. They only play Illinois once, and they only play Iowa once. So they're getting ready to play Iowa on what is that, Tuesday? Then they go, and they've already played Maryland, so they'll play them again on the 16th. They've already played Ohio State. They will have already played IU. They don't play Wisconsin up until that next to last game of the season, in Illinois the same way. They kind of got a kind schedule. They didn't have to play Wisconsin twice. Now, granted, Wisconsin is down comparatively, but honestly, if you're going to play a team that normally gives you fits, you only want to play them once. You don't want to play them a second time. They only played Rutgers once. Good. Yeah, good. So like there are 4 teams.
Revenge game.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't want a revenge game because you know what? It might come to bite us in the butt. So but the Big Ten men, 10 teams within 2 games, and that's removing Purdue out of it because they're sitting 3.5 games up. They honestly could tread water, and I think they'll still win the Big Ten, short of somebody really getting hurt or, just, I don't know. I don't know. The whole team gets food poisoning for a month. I don't know. Right now, that train is trucking down the tracks, and there's not much that's getting in its way that's going to even slow it down. Although tomorrow's stop in Bloomington, that's going to slow it down. I don't know that it'll derail it at any point, but it will slow it down considerably because this is a big matchup. Probably the biggest matchup they've had since maybe that Rutgers game, and that wasn't even highly touted. Now in hindsight, that was a big game. That was a big matchup in the Big Ten. But I would absolutely say one of Purdue's biggest games this year to this point, maybe behind Gonzaga and Duke at the time that they played. So let's move to the second quarter. Let's talk women's Big Ten, and then we're gonna have some women's bracketology after the half. So let's go to it.
Let's do it.
Okay, we're ready for the second quarter. Done with the men. Let's go to the women's Big Ten. Let's look at the standings right quick. Half game separates the top 2 teams. That's IU and Iowa. Both IU and Iowa are sitting with 1 loss in the conference. IU has 11 wins and Iowa at 10 wins. Wow. Those 2 teams, they're number 4 and number 6. And real quick, just a quick, there are 4 top 10 teams, just like there were last week for the women. This week, the Big Ten holds more percentage-wise of the top 10 than they did last week, even though they still have 4 teams.
That's crazy. That just shows you that other people.
That's because Iowa and Maryland were tied for 10th, which meant there were 11 teams in the top 10. Now there are only 10 teams in the top 10. So therefore the Big Ten now has 40% of the top 10 instead of the 37 or 6 or whatever.
Right.
But I tell you what, I honestly, Dalton has said that he thinks Iowa has the most talent on this team. Everything I've seen from IU up to this point makes me think they're the better team of the two. That's just everything. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from Caitlin Clark, and what a game last night she had, or the night before their last game. She had, what was it, 40 plus points. She's the first man or woman in Big Ten history to have 40 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, I think. I forget the exact, and like 3 steals in one game. Like she did all that in one game, which is just insane. It was against Maryland. Yeah, there it is. 42 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. And she had 2 steals. First person, not man, not woman, person in Big Ten history to do that. That is an incredible game. And I still think Mackenzie Holmes and IU are better.
No, I agree. And I say that mainly because I don't disagree with Dalton. I think Iowa more than likely is the most talented team.
I don't disagree they have the most talent.
But that also doesn't mean you're necessarily the best team, because you can be the most talented, but if you can't make it work, that's what's going to come back to hurt you.
Let's use the correlation that I used a couple weeks ago about Purdue. And I hate always doing this, but Purdue's team this year is a better team than they were last year. And last year's team had way more talent than they have this year. Yep. Period.
But they had 2 struggles last year.
Yeah, for sure. But it wasn't through lack of talent.
Right.
It was through lack of execution and things like that. This team that Purdue has this year is, I think they would blow the doors off of Purdue last year, because this year's team can play defense, and you can't just rely on one person. Last year, Zach Edey was good, but he only played half the time because Trevion Williams had to play. And I'm not damning that, because Trevion Williams was really, really good and is a really good player. But Zach Edey hadn't progressed. So like last year's team was really talented. This year's team is more of a team. So I think that's what I'm getting at when it comes to, I think Iowa's the most talented, but I think IU's the better team.
Yes.
And I think that's going to go a long way. We're going to talk bracketology. I think that shows in the bracketology as well.
For sure.
I think Charlie Creme from ESPN puts it in pretty good perspective, that I think he feels the same way. They're not far from one another at all.
No.
But they're I think that IU is the better team, and is going to win this Big Ten. And you know what? They may play each other and Iowa blows them out both times.
Yeah, as you're saying,
I'm wrong then.
We'll really find out on February 9th and
I'm
then
wrong
February
with
26th.
Something, Tony.
Huh?
I said, shocker, I'd be wrong with something.
Right.
Well, we look and we see Ohio State did finally win. They beat Wisconsin in Wisconsin at the Kohl Center.
You say the men's side couldn't do it, so the women's side said, "Hold on, we'll take care of business. Give us 1 second."
Well, and we talked about this on Wednesday, that we felt that while it wasn't going to necessarily be an easy win, this was a bounce back game for Ohio State, and they'd lost 3 in a row. They just didn't look. Here's the thing: they had lost 3 in a row, but they didn't look good doing it.
Right.
They lost by double digits a bunch. You know, 2 of those games against Iowa and against IU, they lost by double digits. Purdue, they trailed a good portion of the game.
Yeah.
They just didn't look like what they had done. They blew the doors off of Wisconsin 90-67.
Yeah.
And Taylor Theory had 25 for the Buckeyes in that game. So
Taylor Mikesell had 21. So I mean,
so a couple of high scores. Yeah.
And then the next closest, she had 19. Cody McMahon, she had 19, and keep in mind she's a freshman too. And then Taylor Theory is
Right.
also a sophomore. So this is a young Buckeyes team that is being able to do this.
Which also lends to you that maybe that's where the skid came from. You know, they're really young. Not always will the young, or there are many times, there are a few exceptions, but most of the time young players who come out the door blowing things away, they hit that bump and they can't do it, you know, and then they regroup, they get some time to regroup and work on some things, and boom, they're back to what, at least a semblance of what they had been prior to that hiccup. And I think Ohio State's probably at that point. I even said that on Wednesday. I think Ohio State is going to be fine. I don't know that I would put them in national contenders status, but I would say that they could easily get to the second weekend of the tournament, and I wouldn't scoff at that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say Ohio State women in the Sweet 16, give me a break. No, I think they could easily do that. Iowa beat Maryland, number 8. That was a top 10 matchup. And Maryland's sitting only 2 games back of IU at the top of the Big Ten at 9-3. Maryland's a team that the women are lucky they don't have Kevin Willard as their coach, to where I would be angry at them. But no, I'm joking. But they, and Dalton was talking about Maryland at the beginning of the year when we previewed the women, that you should watch out for Maryland, and they're just kind of silently doing this. Like you see their record, you see that, wow, they're doing really, really well. That's great. That's awesome. Yeah, which it is. But they're so quiet about it. You don't hear, wow, they really dominate. And but you go against them and you just were in a dogfight.
Yeah.
And that's a team maybe you watch out for come the Big Ten tournament, and then maybe even in March, once you hit the NCAA tournament. Maryland could be a shocking team. I'm not saying they will. I don't know enough to say that I think they're going to go on a Cinderella run, but and how can you be a Cinderella when you're number 8 in the country?
Right, number 8. Not only that, but when you look at the AP polls as far as who they faced, so Iowa, Ohio State, Maryland all have 4 wins. Ohio State and Iowa have 2 losses against top 25 teams. Maryland has 3. But I mean, again, they're 4-3 against top 25. Like, it's 6-0 with IU, 4-2, 4-2, 4-3. Everybody else, the next closest one that has any type of significant number
Purdue's
of wins is Michigan.
And Purdue's 2-3, close to 500. All the rest are below 500 against top 25s.
Yeah.
So you have, let's see, I'm only seeing just those 1, 2, 3, 4. The top 4 teams have a winning record against top 25 teams. Then Purdue's close at 2-3. Everybody else is at least 2 games below 500 against top 25 teams.
Yeah. And look at poor Nebraska, 2-7.
Poor Nebraska,
1-7. Like, they
how about Northwestern 0-8?
0-8. Like, oh my goodness.
And that's not making fun of Northwestern, not at all. It's just, when you talk, oh, poor Nebraska. Well, look at Northwestern. Look at Minnesota. They're 0-6 and 0-8.
Rutgers is 0-7.
Rutgers is 0-7. Penn State's 0-4. Like, there are 5 of the 14 teams don't have a win against a top 25 team. That's, again, not damning those teams. It's just showing that the top of the cream is at the top of that.
Is at the top of the conference.
At top of the conference. So the cream always rises to the top. Yeah. And this is a really exciting time for the Big Ten, because both conferences are extremely competitive. It doesn't matter. And I'm taking Purdue out of that because right now they're not competing with anybody right now for the lead, but everybody else below them is just packed. And then you have the Big Ten women, the top 6 or 7 are just absolutely packed, and then it spreads out, but that makes for exciting times. Plus you've got those dark horses or those upsets at the beginning or at the end of the year that all of us, I can remember when I was growing up, Purdue, Glenn Robinson's junior year, his last year at Purdue, they needed help to get the Big Ten championship, right? So they were behind the game to Michigan. And of all places, Michigan had to go to Wisconsin, and Rashard Griffith was there. It was right after Michael Finley had left, so like they were starting to develop into what Wisconsin is now. And Rashard Griffith went off and just blew them away and beat Michigan. I can remember my dad running into my room because I'd gone to bed, and we didn't have cable. I didn't have cable until I was a sophomore in high school. So he came running in and said, Wisconsin beat Michigan. And I take help. I don't care.
Right.
But those types of games are the exciting part about this time of year. And that's what I'm happy with when it comes to the rest of the Big Ten season. So, well, let's hit the halftime, Tony. And we will talk some bracketology on the other side of the half. Women's bracketology with Charlie Creme from ESPN. So let's go to the half. You are listening to Big Ten Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
I'm Richie, a.k.a. Midnight Agent Raw.
I'm Devin, a.k.a. Special Delivery Dev.
We're the Super Media Bros Podcast. And each week, we give a comedically informative take on movies,
music,
television,
pro wrestling,
and much more. Check us out at supermediabrospodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you can listen to podcasts. Shades on.
We're off.
Once upon a time.
Boring.
It was the best of times. It was the worst.
You got that right.
What's your problem?
We want new stories.
Hi, it's Frankie.
And Garrett. And we host the Ever Trending Story, a weekly podcast where we bring to life a fictional story created by our own minds and some of the hottest, craziest trends from the internet.
Find us wherever you download podcasts, and be sure to join the fun on social media at EverTrendingPod.
So, Tony, I just bought some flyers to do, like a grassroots type of advertising for Big Ten Plus 4. And
you can't go wrong with that type of promotion either.
Yeah, correct. And I got a great deal on flyers at Sticker Mule.
Yeah, I remember you saying that all of our stickers, all of our Klingons, everything like that comes from Sticker Mule.
Yeah, now our flyers too.
I guess so. So Sticker Mule is supposed to be the easiest way you can buy custom stickers, decals, labels, and other printing items all online, right?
Yeah, order in 60 seconds and they'll turn your designs and illustrations into custom stickers, magnets, buttons, labels, and packaging in just days. They offer free online proofs, free worldwide shipping, and super fast turnaround. If you click on the link in the show notes, Herman is going to give you $10 off any purchase of at least $10.
And you can start designing and order in minutes with Sticker Mule.
Yeah, and thank you, Sticker Mule. All right. We are back. It was quick. I got a little warm, Tony, so I had to take my hat off for a minute.
Oh, okay. I say you freaked me out a little bit because I heard the whistle. I was like, wait a minute. You said the promo was going to happen after this. Wait a minute.
I built in the whistle to the promo or the Odd Pods promo, so right. I had to do the Sticker Mule afterwards. So
that's fair.
So now we've made it a habit to every couple of weeks. I don't want to do it every week because it seems like it gets pretty cumbersome, and it just it doesn't make for it definitely fills time, but we've got enough that we usually can talk about well before for a week. And give bracketology a chance to work its way out. But we've talked men's bracketology with Mike DeCourcy regularly. But this morning we're gonna look at the women's bracketology according to Charlie Creme of ESPN, and this is his most recent projections as to what he thinks the women's bracket will look like. And each of those, there are 8 Big Ten teams. We just talked about the top 4 being dominant. We talked about, how there's kind of a log jam. He goes 8 deep in the field. So you look, you've got Maryland over there as the 3 seed in the Stores or in the left bracket. And
Yep.
let's preface this a little bit. I know this looks kind of confusing. It looks like two separate brackets. It kind of is. I don't know that these two brackets on the left play each other in the Final Four. They just happen to go together. Like those brackets just happen to mesh together. But those are both regions that go into the Seattle Washington region, and then the other half goes into Greenville, South Carolina. And what they did, the women last year just expanded out to 68 teams, but this year they have done a little bit more revision where they've gotten rid of the 4 traditional regions and gone to just 2 regional sites for the two. Each site will hold 2 regional finals.
Right.
So they've got 2 going into Greenville, South Carolina, and 2 going into Seattle, Washington, 1 East, 1 West. I mean, it makes sense, I guess, but we've got Maryland in the left bracket there in the Seattle, Washington region as the 3 seed. And one thing I do like about Charlie Creme, his brackets, they tell you whether they're trending up, down, or staying the same. And I wish the up would be a green arrow up, but you can still, honestly, for you, it doesn't matter, does it? Red, green, purple,
not
orange doesn't make a lick of difference.
Nope.
I'm not making fun of you being colorblind. I'm just saying I'm sitting here complaining that the up arrow is red like the down arrow, and then I'm sitting here thinking, well, Tony doesn't even care.
Yeah, no, to me, this is like, to me, I see only the same color. Like, if you're saying it's red and green, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I would love that for just me on the quick fly, I guess. It's my personal problem, I guess, but Michigan is trending down. They are in a 4 seed. So that tells me that, like, even if we're a 4 seed at the last projection, they're holding on is what it is right now. They're in that bracket. And then he has Iowa as the number 2 seed in the same bracket as the Stanford region, and I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
And we talked just a few minutes ago and said Charlie Creme kind of shows that he thinks that maybe IU is the better team of the 2 at this point, because you go over to the far right bracket. We're going to skip one and move back to it, but you go to the far right bracket. He's got IU as the number 1 seed in that Bloomington region that feeds into Greenville. I can't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with it. I'd probably argue if he had it the other way around.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's projections. I probably wouldn't even argue with it then. But not the point. But then he also has Nebraska as one of the last 4 in, playing in a play-in game or a first round game against St. John's. And then he has Purdue as an 11 seed. I think that win against Ohio State on Sunday helped markedly against them, or for them. But I honestly, I do think that Purdue's probably one of those that they're going to make a tournament as long as they kind of keep on doing what they're doing. They can't go on a big skid, but I think they're probably, as long as they perform the way they have been up to this point, I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But you go back over to the left Greenville bracket. Charlie's got Illinois as the 9 seed and Ohio State still a 2 seed. And this was after their 3-game losing streak. He still had them. So that tells me he had them as a 1 seed. And then progressively has moved them down to a 2. It says that they're steady as a 2 seed. So that tells me he didn't hold it against him that they lost IU. He didn't hold it against him that they lost to Iowa. But the loss to Purdue combined with those 2 has pulled them down to a 2 seed.
Yeah.
You go look up in the upper right, up by our logo, there is the conference breakdown. The ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten, all with 8 in Charlie's bracket. The SEC 7, Big 12 6, Big East 5. So a good representation for the Power 6. That's a really good representation. That's well over half the field in those 6.
Yeah.
So, and when you look at almost more than half of the field is automatic qualifiers. that's pretty impressive that they're doing that. But
Yeah.
last four in, excuse me, we talked about Nebraska being there. That's the only Big Ten team in any of those last four in, first four out, next four out. There's no Big Ten other than Nebraska being the last four in. So I think we're looking at maybe an 8-team bid or eight-team bid league with Big Ten at best. I think Purdue could drop out, Nebraska could drop out and drop it to 6. But that's pretty good for a conference that's top heavy. That to have more than half of your conference being represented in a projection, that's still a pretty good outlook for the conference.
Yeah, and I mean that says a lot too for all of those teams. Like we said, 40% of the top 10 right now is Big Ten teams.
Right.
So
right, and so it's exciting to see where people have our Big Ten teams on both the men's and women's side. Much like, we've talked, this is probably Dalton and my favorite time of the year because of the tournament. I'm not going to speak for you because I don't know that I've ever heard you say March Madness is your favorite time of the year. But the reason being is I love seeing matchups that I haven't seen teams play one another, especially Purdue. So like when Purdue plays teams like when they played Yale last year, I was like, wow, they're playing Yale. I didn't want them to play Yale because I was worried, but they played Yale. That's a team I've never seen Purdue play. I love that aspect. I love seeing how things could play out. I'm horrible at prognosticating, which I'm hoping to put together maybe a contest to where our listeners and maybe some guest pickers would join us for March Madness at least on the men's side. But it's just my favorite time of year. So I'm really looking forward to we're less than a month away from March, which means March Madness is coming down the pike. It's trucking towards us. I'm really excited, and I'm really ready to get to the most wonderful time of the year.
Little Christmas analogy thrown in there.
Hey, you know what? That's why I said it, because it's like Christmas to me. That build up of the regular season's like Thanksgiving to Christmas, and then the NCAA tournament is Christmas. It's just extended over 3 weeks, which is awesome,
right?
All right, so I think we're good on bracketology. Dalton is more of an expert on the ins and outs of all the Big Ten teams.
Yes.
I'm not going to lie about that. We're getting better. We're getting better at analyzing, but we want to talk some more about this maybe in another week or so, maybe with Dalton. That way he can put a little bit more foresight into it as well, and we can get a little bit more analysis. But I love talking bracketology. It's one of my favorite topics. I know that sounds weird, but I love looking at a bracket and saying, well, why did they put them here? Why did they put them here? But I could talk for hours about that, so I don't think we want to do that. So,
right.
All right. Well, let's move, Tony, to the fourth quarter and our headlines. All right. We move to the fourth quarter. It's Friday. It's Friday, Tony. That means we have headlines, and we're going to do what we traditionally do and start you off with the Tony Tribune.
So I know we've talked a lot of basketball, but I'm going to bring it back to the football world a little bit, because there is some big news for the Big Ten, especially more specifically for Ohio State. So they managed to pick up former Ole Miss quarterback Davison Igbunuson. I probably butchered that to no end. He's a 4-star recruit out of New Jersey. He was considered the number 1 cornerback coming out of New Jersey and had a pretty good impact for the Ole Miss Rebels last year. He appeared in 13 games, registered 37 tackles, and broke up 5 passes. So Dalstradamus, as I'm probably going to call him, predicted, he kind of pointed out that, you notice Ohio State, they like winning the Big Ten overall, but that's not really their focus. They're trying to build teams to be able to compete for a national championship, to compete with the Bamas, to compete with the Georgias, really compete with about a majority of the SEC, whatever representation comes out of there. And as we saw from the national championship game and the semifinal games, Ohio State versus Georgia was probably the best game out of that. And they were able to keep it close with what they've got. So being able to sign Davison, they provide an immediate boost to that secondary, and it will be interesting to kind of see how Ohio State performs next year. Now, I do have a little bit of questions on the quarterback situation, but we'll kind of see how it goes. And keep in mind, Davison picked Ohio State. He entered the transfer portal about 2 weeks ago, made a visit to Michigan and UCLA. He had interest from Tennessee before he ultimately decided to join the Buckeyes. So big defensive win for the Buckeyes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Ohio State, the rich keep getting richer because, they have that draw. But I honestly, I think you're right. Daltradamus is, they're starting to gear towards competing nationally rather than, just beat Michigan, just concentrating on Michigan. They chose a lane. Now, what you need to do is get your fans on board, because if your fans don't want to just compete nationally, you're going to have issues if you lose against Michigan, but still make the playoffs. Now, I guess what would remedy that? Start winning national championships, and then you can hiccup against Michigan and have it be more accepted, rather than somebody calling for your job because you can't beat Michigan. So,
right.
But anyways, so let's move to the Sam Sentinel, and Tony, I'm going completely away from not completely away from the Big Ten. There is a Big Ten poll to this, obviously. This week we said goodbye for now, anyways, to Tom Brady as an NFL athlete. He retired after what he played 19, 20 years in the NFL, correct?
23 seasons.
23. Okay. So that takes you back to what? 2000, correct?
Yes.
So in 1995, Tom Brady was drafted by the Montreal Expos. He was drafted by the Expos. I believe he was a catcher, and he was drafted in the 18th round. Yes, as a catcher. That was in 95. 2004, the Expos moved to Washington. Okay. So 9 years after he was drafted by the Expos, his team that drafted him, even though he wasn't with them, he was drafted by him, moved cities, countries, even won World Series, even. And Tom Brady retired this week as the final draft pick of the Montreal Expos to retire from their professional athletic career. Say what you want about Tom Brady, but the durability and the ability to play over the course of multiple decades, 3 decades worth of play, is phenomenal. And to think that if he would have played 2 more years, it would have been 30 years that he had been drafted by the Expos and still was a professional, collegiate for Ford, then professional athlete. It's amazing. Again, don't care if you like him or not. Don't care what you think about him as a human being. Really don't care. That is a phenomenal thing. Plus, I think it's kind of funny and cool that he was drafted by the Expos and they haven't existed for almost 20 years.
Well, and part of me kind of chuckled when I first heard that. When I first started to see that once he retired and they had mentioned that he was a part of the Montreal Expos, I was like, so is Tom going to come back into baseball then?
Play a 20-year career there?
Yeah, play a 20-year career there just because why not?
Be able to play with his grandchildren if he wanted.
Literally be able to say, yeah, I played, technically I played, well, he didn't play professional baseball for, 20, 40 plus years by the end
he
of
was he was part of
career.
an organization for that long. Because honestly, I don't know how it works, but if I think he would get to enter if he were to attempt to play a baseball career, I think he could go back into the draft
Probably.
because he never competed at a baseball level, at the professional level. So he's not a, but yeah.
I mean, at minimum, he'd probably be a free agent. I think the
Right.
contract that he probably originally signed
Do you
has
think-
long since faded away.
Do you think he'd sign with the Yankees since he played so long in Boston? It's interesting fodder there.
Right? Ooh, man. You know how many Red Sox fans he would make mad if he did that?
You know how much money, if he was a viable choice, you know how much money the Yankees would throw at him to try to get him to come to the Bronx?
Ridiculous. Ridiculous amount of money.
But 1995, Tom Brady decided to attend the University of Michigan instead of pursue his professional career in baseball. So I thought it was a fun little thing to observe, and a lot of people's seen it, but it's if you haven't, that's amazing. And again, don't care if you like Tom Brady, if you think he's a horrible human being, that part is not in question here. You do you, but 20 plus years of playing professional football, and then prior to that he was drafted by a team that moved 9 years after he was drafted and has won a World Series and played almost 20 years in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Right.
The longevity is amazing. So,
yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap us up today. So Tony, go ahead and take our listeners / watchers around where they can find us and interact with us.
Yeah, so you can find us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Big 10 Plus 4. You do have to spell out plus. You can't just put it in there. It's incredibly annoying, but is what it is. We power through it a lot.
Yeah.
You can also find us on Facebook at Big 10 Plus 4. You can either spell out the plus or put it in there. If you just want to copy paste, you can do that too. That's what makes it super easy about Facebook. It'll take you there regardless. We are also the only sports show on oddpodsmedia.com, where you can find a slew of other great shows. You can find shows about beer, politics, history, food even. And I may not look it, but I am secretly a fat kid trapped in a skinny kid's body. So if you bring up anything about food, you're more than likely going to have my attention. And especially if you mix beer and sports in with it, I'm like, okay, so this is just a tailgate
I'm going to say,
waiting to happen.
We've got a tailgate party at Odd Pods ready to go.
Oh, right.
And we have a show that is based out of Columbus. So like we could actually be hosted by From the Middle.
Right.
Have a tailgate party with Grab 'em in the Brisket and beer in front.
Mm-hmm.
And then we cover the sports.
Yeah.
Tailgate party right there. Boom.
And we'd be set.
Yep.
You can also catch us live twice a week on the ASAP network on Wednesday and Friday mornings. But if you're not able to catch that, or if you're not able to find the link because of all the other great shows that ASAP posts as well, you can also find us on Spotify. Later that same day, you'll be able to see all the stuff that we post here up on the show as far as the bracketology. And you get to see our lovely faces every time that you do.
Well, we're at that time of the show, Tony. We've got to say goodbye. Thank you everybody for tuning in, listening, however you're taking us in. Thank you so much. It's a whirlwind from here, and then we get a little bit of a rest. Announced the other day, we will be changing our name after the NCAA tournament. We will make a move to where it will be not beholden to how many teams are in the conference. But I'm Sam Sprunger. That's Tony Hollinsworth. Dalton Shetler has been out all week, but he is still with us, and we love him so much. He makes us all better, so we're ready to have him back on Wednesday. But as for now, enjoy the games this weekend, and we will see you next week.
Yep.
See you later.